From popular state parks boasting historic abandoned buildings and extreme paranormal activity, to infamous lodges where it's said restless spirits of the past still roam. Are you ready for the most haunted places in Montana? Number 5. The Daly Mansion. The Daly Mansion, located off East Side Highway in Hamilton, Montana, is a historical mansion turned museum that once acted as part of the 22,000-acre Bitterroot stock farm, which was owned by Marcus Daly, one of 3 Copper Kings of Montana. In 1886, Daly purchased the pre-existing Anthony Chaffin homestead, including the farmhouse, and issued both a remodel and extensive renovations, which lasted until 1889 in order to make it suitable as a Daly family summer home. In 1897, the home underwent a second wave of remodels. However, when it was finished, it reminded Marcus of a church, and plans for yet another remodel were placed on the table. Sadly, Marcus would pass on in 1900 before this last remodel was ever even started. Mrs. Daly would continue with her late husband's plans, and by 1910, the home had been completely redesigned. Mrs. Daly would pass on much later in 1941, after which the prestigious old property was boarded up and left abandoned. The old home would remain empty for a time under the ownership of Daly's granddaughter, a Hungarian countess, until 1987, after which it was deeded to the state and opened up to the public. The abode remains a state-owned property and is managed by the Daly Mansion Preservation Trust in partnership with the University of Montana. Surrounded by a whopping 50 acres of land, today the mansion site hosts a wide range of events, tours, private parties, and more. The site continues to undergo renovations, remodels, and modernizations into present times. According to local legend, the Daly Mansion is haunted by the spirits of its former owners and residents, with those setting foot on the property commonly reporting disembodied footsteps, doors opening and closing on their own, voices from empty rooms, strange knocking sounds from the walls, and otherworldly noises in the skies at night. The full-bodied apparitions of both Mr. and Mrs. Daly have been sighted on the property, some claim enjoying their beloved home from beyond, and a number of shadowy figures and additional unidentified entities have been encountered across the mansion's expanse. Many visiting Daly have recounted smelling cigar smoke from empty rooms or the scent of roses in the middle of the winter when there are none present. Also reported across the premises are lights flickering inexplicably, accounts of personal possessions going missing and turning up later in strange places, and extreme cold spots even on warm days. Lastly, orbs and half-formed silhouettes are commonly discovered later in the backgrounds of photographs taken on the property, and visitors often describe feeling as if they're never truly alone. Number 4. The Dude Rancher Lodge. The Dude Rancher Lodge, located off North 29th Street in Billings, Montana, is a historic Western hotel that's widely considered one of the city's most unique lodgings, and that's recognized as looking pretty much exactly how it did when it was first constructed. The lodge originally opened in 1950 under the ownership of Percival Percy Gone and his wife Annabelle. Bricks used in the construction of the building's exterior were mostly salvaged from a number of recently demolished buildings elsewhere, including, eerily enough, an old hospital. Through the mid-1950s, the Stirrup Coffee Shop would open on site. Sadly, Percy would pass on in 1962, with Annabelle later moving into an apartment at the lodge, where she'd remain until being moved to assisted living in 1982 and passing on in 1983. Following Annabelle's death, the business was operated by family for a time until 1992, when it was purchased by Virginia Carlson, who continues to run the establishment to this very day. In 2012, the Dude Rancher Lodge was featured in Hotel Impossible, and shortly after, a local criminal was killed in a police shootout on the property. Fortunately for business, publicity from these two events resulted in a much-needed boom in tourism. The hotel and restaurant remain open to guests to this day. However, enthusiasts should note that reports that the premises is stalked by the spirits of the lodge's original owners have led to 3 rooms in particular, all believed to be paranormal hotspots, being pretty much consistently booked for up to a year in advance. Stories of the supernatural have long surrounded the Dude Rancher, one of the most popular telling that the spirit of Ol Annabelle is still watching over the building. Room 226 was once Annabelle's grandson's room and still contains original furniture. This room, as well as the 2 adjoining rooms, are reportedly the most active spaces in the building, with many entering them describing lights and televisions turning on and off by themselves, knocking on the doors when no one is there, strange scratching noises from within the walls, and disembodied voices. Interestingly enough, one former caretaker claims Annabelle was actually helpful to them and had even unlocked doors or turned on lights in dark rooms. Also frequently reported at the Dude Rancher is the ghost of a man in a blue shirt who is most often sighted walking the hallway toward the kitchen before disappearing. Dubbed Bob, this spirit is thought to belong to a former cook who was known to sneak to the kitchen at night to prepare himself lavish snacks. Lastly, many staying at the hotel overnight have reported hearing what sounds like a group of children running up and down the halls. But whenever these guests go to check on the commotion, they find the area completely empty. Number 3. The Old Montana Prison Museum. The Old Montana Prison Museum, located off Main Street in Deer Lodge, Montana, is a former prison lockup turned museum complex that, upon its completion, actually boasted the impressive title of being the first official prison in the whole of the Montana Territory. The site was initially opened in 1871 as the Montana Territorial Prison, and within a month had already hit its capacity. After an extended period of overcrowded conditions, in 1874, additional cells were constructed, and from 1885 to 1886, a 3-story cell block was erected. Montana would achieve statehood in 1889, with the prison continuing on as the state's primary correctional facility, and in 1893, the prison wall was finished. In 1902, an entirely separate complex for female inmates was completed on the outside of the wall. In 1959, a brutal riot garnered national attention after inmates took control of the facility for a full 36 hours, resulting in the prison later being swarmed by National Guard. In the end, tragically, 3 were killed and countless others wounded. Following this riot, plans for a new facility were set in motion, with our current Montana State Prison being finished from 1974 to 1979, and after which operations at the old site were ceased. The aged former prison was eventually purchased up by the city of Deer Lodge, who placed management in the hands of the Powell County Museum and Arts Foundation. Today, the complex offers a museum and a range of additional impressive historic collections. According to a series of ghost stories and witness accounts, the Old Montana Prison Museum and associated grounds are haunted by a range of restless spirits, with many visiting or working on site reporting extreme cold spots, strange puffs of fog that float with seeming sentience, and claims of people's shadows moving on their own or even away from their person. A ghostly female voice dubbed Nancy has been heard about, and many have described various full-bodied apparitions sighted opening and closing cell doors before disappearing into thin air. One infamous tale tells that something sinister, something evil, inhabits the old solitary confinement room. This presence has been known to attack those brave enough to enter the hole, or to whisper dark things into their ears. Also reported across Old Montana prison grounds are heavy fogs that descend upon the area alone, unpleasant smells many have associated with decomposition, constant electronic malfunctions, and a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. Lastly, one famous local legend tells of Turkey Pete, a well-loved inmate who lost his marbles during his imprisonment. It's said that when Pete passed away in 1967, his was the only funeral held within the prison. Pete's old cell was later transformed into a barber shop, and many insist he may still be hanging around. Number 2. Bannack State Park. Bannack State Park, located along Grasshopper Creek in Beaverhead County in Montana, is a historic ghost town that today stands as a state park as well as a national historic landmark that's grown wildly in popularity in recent times. The town of Bannack was initially founded in 1862 following the first major gold discovery in the Montana region and took its name after the local Bannack people. The town grew rapidly, boasting an impressive population of around 3,000 residents by 1863. The same year, gold was discovered at Alder Gulch, which would later be transformed into Virginia City. Bannack would go on to serve as the capital of the Montana Territory for a time until it was moved over to Virginia City in 1864, and by the end of the year, Bannack's population would hit a whopping 10,000 residents. Unfortunately, this boom led to the town's own downfall, and as gold in the area became increasingly scarce, the population began to fall drastically. By 1870, no more than a few hundred residents remained in the once thriving community, and eventually Bannack would be declared a ghost town. In 1954, the old site was transformed into a state park. Today, this landmark location holds around 60 log, brick, and frame structured remains, most of which are preserved and fully explorable. The site offers tours, campgrounds, historic displays, and even annual reenactments for any with an interest. Disturbingly, at its height, Bannack's large populace ushered in waves of gambling, prostitution, murder, thievery, and other crimes. The original gallows at which many criminals were dealt with was held directly behind the saloon. One road gang of the time is credited in over 100 murders throughout the region, and in 1864, a Bannack sheriff along with 21 others were hanged by a vigilance committee. Local legend tells the site's paranormal activity is a direct result of its turbulent past, and many visiting or working the Bannack area have reported shadowy figures that dart about after dark, strange lights that float through empty buildings, and full-bodied apparitions in old-fashioned clothing. Many have described disembodied voices, footsteps, and old-timey music heard emanating from thin air, and a handful of informal investigations have yielded high EMF levels, unbelievable EVPs, and half-formed silhouettes in the backgrounds of photographs. One infamous spirit purported to haunt Bannack has been identified as Dorothy Dunn, a teenaged girl who drowned in the dredge pond long ago. Dorothy's ghost has been sighted wandering the edges of the creek, clad in a blue dress, seemingly unaware of the living around her. Lastly, and reported all across town, are doors opening and closing on their own, objects sighted moving by themselves or even floating in midair, and the eerie sounds of children crying, always heard from just out of sight. Number 1. The Adams Hotel. The Adams Hotel, located off Main Street in LAVINA, Montana, is a historic hotel turned landmark site that's renowned for once being considered the most elegant and upscale lodging establishment in the city. The hotel was initially constructed in 1908 under one Ludwig C. Leffelt and was recognized for its indoor plumbing, hot water, gas lighting, and down comforters, amenities which were actually pretty luxurious for the era. The property also offered a large dining room and a well-stocked kitchen and bar. Sadly, hotel business was only successful for a time until a series of droughts, grasshopper infestations, and a plummeting economy caused its closure in 1923. The property was left abandoned for a time until 1930 when it was sold to the Lutheran Church. The church would utilize the old bar as their chapel for decades until 1973, after which it was passed through several different owners. In the year 2000, the hotel was purchased by one Raymond Berry, who would use the age structure as his own personal residence for a time. Raymond would work extensively on a range of renovations, modernizations, and refurbishments until his death in 2015. In his will, Berry ordered that the property be passed back to the Lafelt family, who went on to create the non-profit Friends of the Historic Adams Hotel. In present times, the hotel looks much as it did when Raymond Berry lived there and continues to undergo renovations and refurbs. The Adams Hotel has long been surrounded by a slew of tales of the supernatural, with many of its guests, owners, and visitors reporting doors opening and closing on their own, lights flickering with no known cause, and misty forms sighted lying on various beds. A famous legend tells that one Emmanuel Manny Dolt worked as the hotel's cook long ago and for many years. It's said that after the hotel closed down, the Lafelt family let Manny stay on the property indefinitely, and that he ended up passing away in 1927 in room 2 at 70 years of age. Legend furthers to state that before his death, Manny asked for his body to be returned to his home country of Switzerland, but that lack of money resulted in his interment at the local LAVINA cemetery instead. Many believe this left his soul restless. Manny's full-bodied apparition has been sighted across the property, often accompanied by the aroma of delicious foods when none are present. Also reported across hotel grounds are shadowy figures that dart about, the feeling of being constantly watched or followed, and a range of apparitions in old-fashioned clothing. Another legend tells of a woman in white that's been sighted roaming the property. Though not much is known about this apparition's origins, she is most often sighted in the rocking chair located in the entrance hall. Lastly, and possibly most disturbingly, many visiting or working within the Adams have described instances in which they've been tapped, touched, or even grabbed roughly by icy, unseen hands. Taking into account its ridiculously fascinating history, long list of associated urban legends and ghost stories, and the fact that witnesses have reported actual physical contact with the deceased, or possibly something darker, we felt there really was no better choice than the Adams Hotel as our pick for the most haunted place in Montana. Thank you all for tuning in to our list of picks for the most haunted places in Montana. If you enjoyed hearing our histories and ghost stories as much as we enjoyed telling them to you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn notifications on so you get an alert when fresh content is on the way. Throw us a like if you feel we've earned it, and most importantly, share this upload and our channel with anyone you think deserves a good scare. We'll see you all next time.